Now, next question. Is the version printed on your program same as the one we saw on the board?
No.
Excellent. That brings us to the translation section of the festival. As you can see, I wish I knew Russian, so I could read it in its original language, or know French, Spanish, but it's not possible. So, as members of the Turkish community, we feel like one of the contributions we can make to the English literature is providing good translations of the Turkish literature. So we did start with this intention, but of course it took a while. And I would like to start with a project that started actually last year. It's called Meral Divitçi Prize for Turkish Poetry in Translation, and it is, we were approached by Nazim Himet and his wife, Nazim Himet. We would like to thank him for trusting us for handling this prize. Last year we did have a winner. This year our selection committee included Aaron Acı, Sidney Wade, and Erdal Göknar. Unfortunately, based on the number of submissions and the desired level of translation, we do not have a winner this year. But we are committed to this project. We will start working on it, start the announcements as soon as this festival ends, and maybe make some adjustments in the rules. But this is again a very important part of the Nazim Himet Poetry Festival now, and again, please help us if you can to get the word out about the Divitçi Prize for Turkish Poetry in Translation. So this, hopefully we will have a That's correcting me there.
I just wanted to say there's a bookland change.
Oh, bookland. Okay, sure. Why we didn't have that many submissions? We asked for 50 pages of translation, so it's a bookland. It is expected to be in perfect condition, ready to be published. By the way, last year's winners are, they're working with them in order to get the book published. So if you would like to learn more about that, we can talk later, or you can talk to Mehmet. He's going to correct me. So. Now, as I said, this translation has always been in our hearts, and if you are a winner of the competition, or if you are here, you are part of the Nazim Himet Poetry Festival family. So one of the outcomes of that is some of the winners had the desire to translate Turkish poetry. So we have been forming teams in order to achieve best possible translations of the Turkish poems. So today we have two examples of that. Well, one example of that and one additional translation. Jeffrey Kars was one of the winners of the Nazim Himet Poetry Competition, and he was paired with poet Hatice Örüm Öztürk. And Hatice, I would like to invite you here. She will read their translation of Behçet Necati'de.
It has been claimed that people would not learn foreign languages if it weren't for the desire to read poetry in original language. I, for one, believe in this, because 15 years ago, after reading translations of Syrian poet Nizar Tabani's love poems, I decided the impossible feat of learning Arabic. So these translations are not going to be perfect ever. I fight with Jeffrey over the email forever for merging to a sentence, especially with this poet, who is extremely minimalistic. His sentences double up in length when we try to carry the meaning. Jeffrey tries to squeeze them in, and I say, no, you missed it, he said this too, and then we translate only maybe half a dozen poems in a year. And I don't write well, I don't translate well, I don't read well either, but please bear with me. I'll share two of the poems with you this afternoon. This has been an incredible day today. Everybody was on top of their act and they delivered incredible amount of thought, aesthetics and feelings to us. So I have a very difficult job here, but if you maybe if you can make room for imperfections, then maybe others will be encouraged too. I would like to say that, to tie it to our Russian theme today, the poet Behçet Necatigil's poetry is like those embedded Russian dolls. So on top there's the world, in the middle there's his house, and inside there's the basement, the dark basement. What I am going to do today, I picked two poems at two interfaces. One is the house and the world interface, the other one is the basement and the house interface. So with that I will go with the poem titled Outing. Just to give you a time frame, he was born in 1916 and of course he died in the 70s, but he will be celebrated in his 100th year birthday next year. This is why we are working on some of his poems. Outing. Are you leaving for the streets? Be careful. Trust in God. The street translated means losing one half of the self. Hold up in those rooms. The cool quiet of the house filled you. You owe all this to its protective walls that held the waves of friendship breaking around you. Don't go out. It will ruin this magic. Though the house feels so plain when compared with your hidden, moldy life to streets that are fresh and well lit. Finally, your ruthless soul returns home. That's exactly how those seductive streets work. You push away any hand that reaches out to you. The weather doesn't matter. You will return from the street a traitor. You have seen how they live out there. Of course it is ridiculous to bring the wind home because the house is too small, but it happens. And be careful as you leave. The wind will surely blow the streets inside. Next one is the interface at the house and the basement. The title is Traditions, but not the good ones, not the ones we celebrate, the dark ones, the taboos. Traditions. Frightening me the thought lives in a dark basement in prison. If the lock he is forcing to open breaks, I know I'm finished. I misunderstood that joyful moment as a form of quiet before it was butchered into pieces by the howling from his pit. I didn't lock that thing downstairs for my pleasure, but I worked like a dog to keep him there, that half smile, a fawning look. Now is not the time, maybe later. When he realized he had been tricked, the raging sound of being betrayed echoed over the walls of his dark place. Before him, many others had stayed. In that darkness, out of sight, they begged and pleaded. Many died. A few survived and finally saw daylight. Truth is, I am no executioner. Why would I want to jail the desire to live? But if this was my ambition, your traditions would beat me to it. Thank you.
Next, we have poetry of Fazıl Hüsnü Dağlarca, translated by Talat Halman. Talat Halman passed away earlier this year, and we wanted to honor him. And I would like to invite Erdal Gökner both to introduce us to Talat Halman and also read the poem.
Talat Halman, we had a wonderful a memorial evening with Talat Halman, for Talat Halman, just in January. He passed away in December. Unexpectedly, he passed away at work, which he was, his last position was being, he was professor of Turkish literature, language and literature at Bilkent University in Ankara. He's kind of, in some ways, the forefather of Turkish studies in the United States. He did have teaching positions at Princeton and Columbia at a time. He is a prolific translator. He's got an incredible number of works. He had something, I think it was in the hundreds of published articles that he had. He basically opened the way for studies of Turkish and especially modern Turkish literature outside of Turkey. And so in many ways, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for him, so I have plenty of respect for him. The reason I'm smiling, is because every scholar knows that it is much easier to work with a deceased author than it is to work with a living author. I have personal experience with this thing, but it may also be easier to work with a deceased, highly respected translator. So I'm going to read some poems that were translated by Talat Halman by the poet is Fazıl Hüsnü Dağlarca, a very well-known Turkish poet who was with us until 2008. He was born in 1914. Has a broad spectrum of work that goes from more social realism to historical realism to some sort of nationalist epic type poetry to even a kind of a surreal work. So he's an incredible breadth of work. However, as I was reading through the poems last night, I couldn't help but edit them. So and excuse me, are we being recorded? So this is translated by Talat Halman and Arabic. So I couldn't, anyway, excuse me. So here, I'll give you some. The first one is from a longer epic. I'm just going to give you a fragment of it. And it begins with a little, sort of an epigraph. He suffered the crowd's anguish. I'm scared of this bazaar, with its lovely and ugly people. I feel all these lives in me, as if we wake on the same pillow. Stones can be given a human shape, humans the shape of earth, as though no one is aware, and man can exist alone. Cars, trolleys, and peddlers go by. I verge on sleep for a while. People leave the city squares, but not my grief. The waters are wiser than we. The waters are wiser than we. They see the night sooner. They descend into darkness before the air and vanish like a huge fish, while hills receive a wild stampede. Waters are wiser than we. They are satisfied by trees, not by other people, who leave us alone. Waters are wiser than we. They don't sleep, but open their wide eyes to the blueness. And they wait in a death-sworn secret to place their own lives. Death against the deathless. There is something about you, death, in the blackness, in the greenness, in the blueness of your eye. As if water were an enemy of the sea, the roar of the winds drowns out the sound of the waves. As if your glory grows in all corners and climates, as your name gets inscribed stone by stone. There is something about you, death, something petty. When one grows up, you grow jealous. Blind corpse. All the corpses arose, dressed in white, from 1,000 dreams. They arose with the harmony of water, air, earth, and fire, of the whole world in their hearts. All together they ascended. The blind corpse could not orient itself to the height of God. And one final poem, which I will give to the public prosecutor. This is a poem that was written in response to a case. Obviously, in the case of Russia and in Turkey, there's a long tradition of animosity, tension between the state and the author. So this goes on to the present day. So this is Fazıl Hüsnü Dağlarca responding to his being summoned for a court case for something he's written. And he was, for much of his life, he had a bookstore in the old part of Istanbul, and he would put up the poems as they came to him, and as he kind of typed them out, he would put them up on his window, so people would come look at the store window where he would have his most recent poems hanging there. The public prosecutor. Prosecutor, did you ever think what gives the hills their crowned height? Day or night, they never hush, but shout from the peak. A jobless man from the hills stands barefoot at your door. Even you pity his plight. Prosecutor, did you ever think what gives the knives their bite? A right never claimed, bloodshed never questioned, the toil and sweat of this man or that crowns the head and makes it bright. Prosecutor, did you ever think what you find in writings to indict? Huge with mind and soul, days against the night, but down the ages, over you, what gives me all my might. Thank you.
Well, I could either read Betty Adcock's resume, or you could listen to Betty Adcock read poems, but there isn't time to do both. She's had that much accomplishment. I will mention, though, that she has published 6 books from LSU Press, a couple of them upstairs, and J.K. Press was very honored to be able to publish her Widow poems, the most recent small collection, which is wonderful. In addition to being an excellent lyric poet, not just one of the best in North Carolina, but one of the best in the country, Betty also is an incisive critic. I don't know if anyone here was at the presentation she did at Greensboro Library a week ago on the lyric narrative. She was on the panel with Al McGinnis and Stephanie Levin. It began with just an intense reading explanation of one of her own poems that I learned more there than probably with an entire seminar that went over the course of 4 months. Well, probably there's a couple facts that you should probably know about Betty. One, her mother was a shape note singer in Texas, where she's from. The other thing, which is a little problematic, is Betty is responsible for creating a group of wayward ladies. That's true. She has a poetry group. Elizabeth Jackson is one of them. Noelle Crook, who has a recent book out, and it's one of the, I think it was the 2 best poetry groups in the state. Critique groups of Betty's and Julie Sukes down in Charlotte. And I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to let Betty do what she does best, read poetry. Betty.
Thank you. Oh my, I'm following a lot of wonderful stuff. This is scary. It's been a very, very interesting day and an honor for me to be chosen to be the reader here. I'm going to take a sip of water so I'll be okay. All right. I'm going to begin with a very, and I'm going to keep it reasonable because I know that everybody is hungry. Barrier Islands in North Carolina, we all know that they move those islands off our coast. And I remember thinking one day, maybe they're dancing. And so it just sort of gave birth to this little lyric poem. The term pavane in here refers to a very, very slow dance. And the term capriccios refers to very, very fast dances. Okay? Barrier Islands, skirts of the continent, ruffled in heavy pavane of sand and tide and frenzied, frenzied in capriccios of gales, can sometimes tear like lace on the turns, as of dancers wearing the wind, wearing the moon. Salt drenched, beloved of the hurricane, their drift is longer than the sea's step in, step out. partner in the storm, but answers no offer. We say of something new, cutting edge, we say. This power is like the slow velocities of art, shifting stillness, all time in motion, all motion trying to be formed. And I'm sorry that I'm reading so slowly. It's because I have new glasses, I have desperate eye problems, and I sometimes mess up when I'm reading, so be patient with me. I'm 77. I get to be infirm. This next poem is entitled, Why White Southern Poets Write the Way We Do. And there are a couple of words in here that there are a couple of things that might need a little explaining. One is the word chiffonier, which is a mispronunciation of a French word, but it is said chiffonier, and it's a sort of closed chest that is in southern rooms, and that occurs. And also the hoop snake occurs. That's a myth that all southern kids in my day believed in, which is that it was believed that an ordinary black snake could take its tail in its mouth and become a hoop and roll and run after you. And we truly believed that. Okay, why white southern poets write the way we do? Because we were the last ones deserted by the god of visions and serpents. Because an August field can levitate on the ratcheting din of cicadas, and the magnolia, offering its melted candles, burns invisible prayers on the sunlight. Because every one of us has at least one relative who plowed poor with a mule. Because the dead still enter our sleep as columns of figures on the debit side of the ledger. And there are darker voices in which we cannot speak. Black ghosts, smoke hanging in the twilight live oaks. Because we found the broken words everywhere, rolling like beads under the chiffonier. And we weren't suspicious when our breath strung them in patterns heavy as scripture. Because a mist can sit in a pasture like a cloud in a basket. And we were not, and we never stopped believing in the hoop snake. That it really does roll to assert the compass of time, framing the vanished, the exiled, dreamers, even ourselves, rising to the occasion, almost reprieved as the weed-strangled fields rise in autumn fire, to dance anyhow, to grieve. That anyhow is another Southern expression. It takes the place of anyways or anyway, which is what other people say. Yeah, right. Anyway. But it comes, I think of that wonderful song. I don't care what mama don't allow, I'm gonna make my music anyhow. So that's sort of what I'm saying. This next poem is called Roustabout. A roustabout is a guy who helps put together rides and tents and operates the rides and so forth at county fairs and that kind of thing. And when I was about 22, 21, I was married very young. I was married at 18, had a daughter at 19. And when I was about 20, my husband and I lived in Rockingham, North Carolina. And we went to the 5-county fair. And there was the octopus ride, which older people will remember. That had all the 8 arms oscillating wildly and the cupped seats spinning and swimming all around it. And there was a roustabout there who was performing more or less on the octopus anyway. Roustabout. I was 22, pretty maybe. It was a small town county fair, hot dogs, freak shows, cotton candy, and heavy wheels laden with light, all tuned to the gaudy air. The octopus, remember that one? 8 arms like extended girders. The thing was a metal Shiva juggling worlds. A cup spun at the end of each madly oscillating arm, every cup overfull of squealing kids or lovers drunk on the whip-sharp, unexpected torque toward the expected rapture. He was maybe 20, bare-chested, tan, and gleaming in the southern September night. A kind of summer in the lights that played across him as he pulled the levers to arm the bright contraption with speed and plunge, with whirl and rise. His hair was almost red in the light's translation. Not many riders yet, when suddenly he leapt onto one of the metal arms in its low sweep and rose with it and laughed. I thought it might be for me, this showing off. He jumped onto the next arm as it rose, went up with it, then landed easy on the ground. He vaulted the lowered ones as they went by, stepped up again and down again and ducked under so a steel arm grazed his cap. How long ago it was. How long did I stand and watch this wild control before I turned to find my husband and my child? He's likely dead now, or deep asleep in some wine-dark room, some ragged dream. I think no golden years follow that life, though I still see him shining new against black sky and turning stars, chancing it, taking on the monster, winning, dancing it. And speaking of subjects, I mean, I think everything that I write is based on something real. I mean, everything, I used to say to my students that you can't make anything up because everything happens. All you have to do is pay attention. You know, if you pay enough attention, the poems are everywhere. This one is called Housekeeping. It's a short lyric. Also, I'm trying to shorten this down a bit for us. And this is a true story. We did buy a birdhouse and we put it in a tree, and various things happened. And I started to think about how you shouldn't question whatever rises in life. Okay? Housekeeping. We bought a roofed box for birds. They never came. We nailed it higher in the oak and got for tenants a dark, unspecified snake, a bat the color of cinnamon, and finally a flying squirrel with regular habits. No wings unless you count the squirrel's sliding skin or the bat's leather. The snake, of course, was early. In another house, I was learning never to quarrel with means of ascension. Let rise whatever will, in whatever way is possible or several. And I'll read just two more and then we can go and have some refreshments, which I'm looking forward to. This next poem is from the chapbook that Richard mentioned from J.Carr Press. It's called The Widow Poems. I lost my husband of 54 years, 4 years ago this season. And in April, actually died in May, but the starting began in April. And grief is a terribly, terribly difficult thing. And I did not believe that I could write it. But in a sense, my friends, the Wayward Ladies group, by the way, Elizabeth Jackson named us that. They pressured me to have a poem every other week. And because I was consumed with grief, this is what I wrote. And I think it was wonderful that I had somebody pressuring me. I think I would have written them anyway, but I think it would have taken me much, much longer. The Widow's House. The widow's house seems to be coming apart. Pieces of wall, snatches of a rug, chair rungs, shingles, plumbing, lamps and doorknobs, glass shatters from rows of still framed faces. The mirrors are dusking over, no longer disclosing. Everything floats as if gravity has left this place. It's not violent. It's a loosening, a soundless disengagement. Even her body has become otherwise, flesh that can no longer recognize itself. Perhaps it is she who has gone to ash, gone to ground in the dark. She has asked so hard for him, crying in the night, weeping into pots on the stove, roses in the garden. Perhaps she is the ghost. In the house they built, dissolving, turning now as if in the grip of a slowed tornado, air full of what could be confetti in some kind of decelerating celebration, music, books, conversations, shredding in the wind that memory always becomes. Unfastened, recasting, disheveling as the end of lovemaking. She sits on a splintering floor, surrounded by the done for. And then the last poem is going to be very different. It is, it's called Ode to a Guinea Pig. And my granddaughter, I have two wonderful granddaughters adopted from China. We have a sort of international house. My son-in-law is Jewish, was raised in New York. My daughter, of course, is my daughter. And our two children are adopted from China. My two grandchildren. So anyway, but one of them fell in love with a guinea pig in a pet store, and here we are. I was not familiar with these animals. I never had one, and I think there's more to them than I know, you know. So I decided to think about it. And there's a reference to Kierkegaard in here, who rather famously said, "I believe because it is absurd." Borrowing it from Kierkegaard, I love this animal because he is absurd. A small mammal lacking all ambition. He carries no heavy affectations of joy. His whistle is sharp and singular and only for food. It makes an honest music. He does not lie to us. I am here is the one communication in his Buddha sitting, his fat-assed waddle. The only surprise he offers is the occasional dash, faster than you'd imagine, to nowhere in particular. He's no wild thing, yet not quite tame. His name is of no interest to him. Don't call me, he could be saying. I guess his DNA has nothing of the pig, the rabbit, ox, or cow. Perhaps he's related to the long thoughts of philosopher, or is a creature of his own imagining, a plump baby god watching over an attenuated world. He loves us as he is able, comprehending warmth and softness, lettuce leaves and hay. He understands snug openings. He embodies the poet's admonition not to mean, but to be. and also Hamlet's assertion, but without the "or not" part. There's no creature like him because he has dreamed no such thing. We should take note of him. Bask in that steady gaze and learn. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here again. We will be serving dinner soon, but since it's cold out, all the books. Yes. Since it's cold outside, we will turn this room into a dining room. We will bring the tables in, so we are asking that you go upstairs. We have coffee and tea there, and if you're interested, we have books, book signing and all that upstairs. And if you want to get some fresh air, please go outside, but stay here, stay close to the building. We will have dinner in about 10 to 15 minutes. Do we have another announcements at this point? Once again, thank you all for being here.